Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 491 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our fifth book just came out. It's called Perseverance and How to Be a Great Fraternity or Sorority Alumnus. So go and pick up that book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, I have just finished chapter 3 of my dissertation on the early warning signs of hazing in college fraternities and sororities. So I am super pumped to invite our next guest onto our show to talk about hazing in Black Greek letter organizations, multicultural organizations, you name it. All of the things that she's interested in, I am very interested in hearing more about. So I am super excited about today's podcast interview. Let's just get to it. Dr. Carolyn Eastlin is the Director of Institutional Equity at Oklahoma City Community College. Dr. Eastlin earned a Doctor of Education and Educational Leadership from the Educational Foundations and Leadership Department at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. She also obtained a Master of Science in Education and Adult Education from the Counseling Adults and Higher Education Department and Bachelor of General Studies from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Northern Illinois University. Here's what's cool. Dr. Eastlin's research interests include hazing within Black Greek letter organizations, the effect of state anti-hazing statutes on Black Greek letter organizations, and also how hazing deaths affect Black Greek letter organizations' group decision-making. She aspires to use all of this knowledge to create anti-hazing trainings, leadership trainings that elicit an emotional response that results in changed behavior within Black Greek letter organizations and other multicultural orgs. Welcome to the show, Dr. Eastlin.
Thank you. I couldn't have said that better myself. I'm glad we have all the same interests. Thank you so much for having me today.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Yeah, we are identical in terms of what we're interested in studying. So I know that this is going to be so much fun. Now, for our listeners, I think they want to know a little bit more about kind of your upbringing. I know you decided on Northern Illinois for both your undergraduate and also your master's program. Tell our audience, why did you choose Northern Illinois?
Oh my God, I had been a Husky since I was 5. My uncle, Dr. Larry Bowles, had served as the previous dean of students, primarily over at the time judicial affairs, student conduct. And so even from a little kid, I had my Husky gear on. I was ready to go. As I got older, it felt a natural choice as an undergraduate to want to go. It was far enough away from home and mom for me to be independent, but close enough for meals and love from family. So that was primarily why I went. What I gained while I was there that made me stay for my master's was this very unique experience of empowering student leaders and making those friends that we are still very much friends today. So those lifelong friends that we often talk about with college students. I was able to do that at Northern Illinois. I chose to stay for my master's because it was the connective tissue from that student experience that even sparked that aha moment that I wanted to go into higher education. And so the program that I was in, it was amazing. It was the great balance of rigor and the opportunity for practical application of knowledge. So like those student development theories that we talk about, the GSARP weekend just gave us opportunities to go ahead and land those graduate assistantships so we can take the theory to practice into our real lives. And I think it was just a no-brainer for me at the time. So kind of once a Husky, always a Husky. And so I had been a Husky since I was 5, and that really worked for me.
Love that story. And I'm so happy that you are in higher ed. I mean, boy, we need more champions like you within higher ed. So I'm so glad that you're here. You also joined Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated there, and you even served as NPHC President. So why did you choose Sigma Gamma Rho? I'm sure you could have joined any organization on campus.
Yes. I think when you know. I actually graduated from high school a semester early. And so before I went to Northern Illinois, I went to a community college, and I had a professor at the time for social science, who was a member of Sigma Gamma Rho. She'd always carry her bag. She'd take extra time after class to like connect with me, talk about my journey and what I was interested in. And when I went to college, I was like, I need to go find positive role models and sisters like her. And so when I got to the campus, I sought out the blue and gold bags, and they will tell you I followed them, I asked questions, I was at the events, I was there. But ultimately, people go where they feel comfortable and they feel safe, and who they recognize as people who they can see themselves with and who they can see themselves in. And so for me, it was Sigma Gamma Rho, but that's always been like my message to leaders too. Like people go where they see themselves. And so it's important to be a role model in that way.
Well, good for you for asking questions. I know you're quite the investigator, and so I'm glad that you were chasing after them, asking a lot of questions. I think
Yeah,
that's the way to do it. Ask a ton of questions until you feel like you know that you've got all the answers that you need to make the right decision. Because we know this is for life. This isn't just something that's like disposable, just like everything else that is today.
absolutely.
This is a lifelong decision. You know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about too is, thinking back on your time as NPHC president, are there, now you have a body of work within higher education. Are there things that you wish you would have done differently as NPHC president?
You know, as a student leader, the extension of grace, I thought I had to have it perfect and I had to have it right. And during that time, it's really a great learning opportunity to get your feet wet at leadership. You'll have your whole life to perfect it and get it right. So therefore, it doesn't have to be perfect. And so if there's anything I would go back and change, it was that we were kind of like in a unique situation. I felt like we were little professionals. Northern Illinois entrusted us with a lot of money. I put on a homecoming step show in conjunction with the leadership team at that time. We raised about $70,000, 30,000 in profit at the bills. They really empowered us in a way that we were able to see the fruits of our labor even while being there. The previous board had did a proposal pitch to start an NPHC yard at the time at NIU. And then from during my year, they took out like $100,000 out of our account. We had been collectively fundraising through that time. It just felt everything felt so serious, and it was so like it had to be perfect. And in hindsight, like just have fun. Like you will make mistakes. Those are learning opportunities. I tell my students even now, either you win or you learn. And either way you're winning because either you're learning or you landed it. But either way, like everything's gonna be okay. I don't know why it was so serious. It just had a very serious undertone. So if I had a chance to go back and do anything, I would have lightened up a little bit, had a little bit more fun, and took it as a learning opportunity that I had to grow.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I feel like today's college students, they're perfectionists still. They never want to make a mistake. And it's like you and I, we both made mistakes. All right. I could write a book
Plenty.
about all the mistakes that I made. But I agree with you. I subscribe to the same exact thoughts. Either you win or you learn. I mean, I've learned a lot because I made a lot of mistakes. As chapter president, as executive director of my national fraternity, as CEO of Greek University, I've made mistakes. And there are things that I would do differently if I had a redo. But all we can do is learn from it and get better every single day. And so, what you see today is just a result of a lot of learning.
Yep.
That's what you
I
want to see.
totally agree. Totally agree.
People think that it's just like a straight line to success. No, there was a lot of wrong turns.
A lot
Okay.
of wrong turns and zigzags
Yeah.
and straight lines, as in like linear moves and like then up moves. Like it's no straight trajectory for sure.
100%. And so now you're the director of institutional equity at Oklahoma City Community College. That's a big title. What are your responsibilities in that position? What do you do day to day?
Oh man, I don't think any 2 days look the same. So I focus on ensuring the college compliance with Title IX. So the prohibition of discrimination based upon sex, and then EEO matters that deal with Title VI and Title VII. So prohibiting discrimination based on protective class that looks like race, gender, disability, sex, age, parenting status. So I work a lot with students on the Title IX side here at Oklahoma City Community College in terms of like pregnancy and parenting accommodations. But the biggest thing that I absolutely love to do is preventative measures in terms of training, um, making sure that our students know about the resources that we have and making sure our students understand the legalese, I like to say, of policy and what they're responsible for and what their role are as students. So putting it in layman's terms and making it in acceptable pieces, so we make sure not only are we walking the walk, talking the talk, but walking the walk and kind of living our institutional values.
I love it. Really good stuff. You're also the ADA coordinator for your institution. How do we make fraternities and sororities more welcoming for students who have disabilities? I don't think we're paying enough attention to this. I think, and in turn, we end up losing some really great new potential members for our organizations. What can we do to be more welcoming?
I agree. I would say we're not paying enough attention to this, and there are a lot of folks behind the scenes that are members of our organization. Just because they don't have visible disabilities, don't mean that they do not have them at all, right? And so we have to continue to have conversations about creating spaces where individuals can bring their whole self. I don't go into Sigma Gamma Rho just as a, a collegiate woman. I go as a first generation student. I go in as, even with a student, even though I don't think I wanted to identify this at the time, even with a student with a disability, I had a late diagnosis of ADHD. We have to create spaces where people feel comfortable to even want to disclose, like, hey, I need to do some things differently. And so I think just taking an environmental scan of your chapter environment, same in the employment context, environmental scans to make sure that we're creating conducive environments for individuals with an array of different disabilities to be able to take part in our organization's activities and joining our sisterhoods and brotherhoods.
Okay, that's really good stuff. And I know you do a lot of consulting on DEI and leadership, on hazing prevention for group letter organizations. I'm wondering on the DEI side, how can traditionally white organizations, so I'm talking about IFC or Panhellenic, how can they make progress in getting more diverse students to join their organizations? Because I think they're better if they are more diverse. But diverse students are looking around at these IFC and Panhellenic organizations saying, I don't see anybody that looks like me.
Absolutely. And again, I don't think when we say I don't see anyone that looks like me, it's all about color.
Right.
I don't see anyone that am able to connect with or made efforts to connect with me. But before we talk about the recruitment of, diverse individuals, I think it's important for not just IFC and CPC, but all organizations to take what I call a chapter scan, right? If I recruited, let's say 5 diverse members into my chapter, based on the organizational culture of my chapter, would those 5 individuals still want to be members by the end of the year? Or would they still be as excited and engaged in organizational activities and bonding by the end of the year? If you think the answer to that is no, before we get to the point where we want to recruit diverse members, we have to do what we have to clean our house, right? We wouldn't invite company over and our house is in disarray because we want to create a conducive and inviting space for our guests. So it's the same thing when we think about diverse members joining, um, you know, IFC and CPC, even NPHC, we have to take a chapter environmental scan to say, what are some practices and some things that we do? And it takes a high level of honesty to say, hey, sometimes we have these jokes or remarks, or hey, sometimes we have this going on or that going on. If we want diverse members, then we have to address these things before we bring them in. And then in terms of bringing them in, we just have to create spaces where we are inviting and getting people out and bonding with them, not because they are of diverse nature. So not because they're Black, not because they're a minority, but because they are the best person that you see embodying your organization's values, And you can see having a lifelong sisterhood and brotherhood with this individual. So less about the focus of meeting this concept of having diversity in the organization, and because that's surface level, but focusing on the deeper levels of understanding what it takes to recruit, connect, and maintain our members in that way. And so sometimes we focus so much on recruitment, we invite people into spaces, and those are not safe spaces for them to be, because we have not done the work to make that environment conducive for the safety that it requires to have to bring them in and maintain them.
I love that answer. That is really, really good stuff. We should be talking about hazing too, because it continues to be a major issue within fraternity and sorority life. And now we're approaching fall recruitment season, so we're seeing all of rush talk and everything else going on. But here's my frustration, right? I mean, we can do the research and we can do the work on hazing prevention, and we can talk about bystander intervention, and we can talk about replacement activities for hazing in fraternities and sororities. But the reality is that this continues on. I feel like we've made very little progress over the last 100 years. We're still talking about the same thing 100 years later. So how are we going to finally end hazing?
You know, I I think I've come to the realization that we may not. It extends even beyond its time in the United States. You can go back to the British colonies, you can go back to the Middle Ages, different terms, different names we will not use today, but it has exists. It is systematically embedded in what seems like the hallmarks and crest of the organization's existence. But what we can do is remind, and so almost like risk reduction. We have the solution to this problem is continuous education and continuous connectivity, I believe, back to those incidents where we got it wrong. So even in my work, I have a training called 911 What's Your Emergency, where we focus on learning about anti-hazing practices, but through the usage of 911 video calls from members and deaths. So yes, there's a trigger warning because it be absolutely triggering, but it's when we fail to remember the loss of life and we become numb to that, is that when we can fall back into habit and fall back into hazing activities. So if we remember, most people like, oh, it's drinking a couple of drinks, it's doing some silly things. That's what it seems like on surface. But what happens when it goes too far? They didn't think they were going to have to make that 911 call. Somebody's screaming bloody murder in the background. This person they're saying is not even breathing. We have to keep people connected to that, or else those deaths happen in vain.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. That's also something that I focus on as well, is just looking back in history, looking over the last 10 years. Let's look at some of the famous hazing cases that are out there, so that way we don't forget and they didn't die in vain, but we are talking about it. And we need that continuous education. I feel like we have new members that are coming in every 6 months. So if we haven't done the hazing prevention education, then we've never done it, because we have new people. They're coming in with experiences from high school. We know that they're having experiences in high school, in the band, in athletics, wherever. And then they're bringing that, even their church retreat, by the way, that's another story I could tell you for days. And then they're bringing that into our fraternities and sororities in college. So it's almost like we're almost too late by educating in college. It actually starts in high school before they even get to campus.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And people try to bring those experiences and make them applicable within our organization, even if it wasn't their experience within the organization. Like, well, we want to change this because the ideology is that, these two organizations that are our rivals, right? Our rival organizations say we're not made enough, or we didn't pledge enough, or we're not hard enough. I think always what it boils down to is the wantingness of a respect and wantingness of people to like us, in terms of like, I did this, people should be proud of this. It's like a badge of honor. Um, but even during my study, I remember talking to fraternity members being like, I didn't participate in that because my values, said to me that essentially I don't have to do that to like that. There's this is so multifaceted even for this interview. So I will keep this simple and we could talk about this for hours, but I would say the main piece is open lines of communication, making sure that we have active advisors, all of the things that we are doing now, and just continuing to move forward. I will say, I do think that legislation has made some great headway in states like Ohio, states like Pennsylvania, where they are starting to have more accountability at the state and institutional level for mass reporting. So we're getting that data in to see what types of hazing are going on within organizations so we can be able to address beyond, just our assumptions. You might know what's going on in your organization, but you may not be privy to information about other organizations. So as of late, I've been trying to take a look at some of those reports, being like, okay, well, we're seeing a lot more of this, or that's a different turn. Usually they say fraternity hazing is more physical. I'm seeing some alcohol cases in there. I'm like, okay, well, this is interesting turn. As we look at some of the greats like Parks and Kimbrough and some of the data that they report back, and just looking at the raw data of what's being reported at the institutional level, like, okay, well, now we know what's going on. Now we know how to craft, trainings and facilitations to be able to address some of those things.
Well, Parks and Kimbrough are all over my dissertation, so absolutely yes. I love the point that you made about advisors. I think if you want to show me a successful fraternity or sorority chapter, I'll tell you that they have involved advisors, and those advisors can help to keep them on the straight and narrow. And when they fall off, put them back on track. A lot of times where these chapters fall off is because they have no advisors. There's no adult supervision. There's no mentorship. There's none of that. And then they end up falling off the track. So that is a key for sure.
Even advising teams,
Yeah.
because a lot of advisor chapter 3 hours away, advising chapter 6 hours away. Like, okay, then I know you're probably not an active in-person advisor. Those pop-ups, those communications, those, trusting but verifying things that are going on are very important. And I don't know, I think it takes a village, and it's definitely not a one person thing. So advising teams and just making sure somebody is local to be able to interact and lay eyes and see.
You made some really good points too on like transparency as well. My son, interestingly enough, is going through Rush right now. And so, he's able to actually pull all the data. He's a data scientist. So he's pulling all of the data on chapter GPA, on new member GPA, on violations within the chapter. And I'm like, my boy, you got it. I'm like, he gets it, and with that transparency, where you can do that research and actually look at violations, that's super helpful, I think, for parents and also for students to get the data they need in order to make an educated decision. So I think all of that is good. A couple of things, I think, hazing looks very different depending on the council that you're in. So that's one of the things that I'm looking at in the dissertation. I think within IFC, forced alcohol consumption, within Panhellenic, mental abuse, NPHC, different, right? It could be, physical hazing. So it really looks different, and I think we have to educate, especially new student affairs professionals, that maybe they only have one experience within one council. They might not be aware of what to look for. So that's kind of some of the things that I'm looking at. And also, when are we going to finally get a federal definition of what hazing is? Every state's got a different definition, and the students are like, Mike, I don't know what hazing is. They're like, Mike, everything is hazing, and they just throw their hands up.
Yep, I agree. Beyond the military, but beyond the armed services, there is definitely a need for a federal definition that trickles down to streamline the state's definition and to help provide guidance towards what sanctioning should look like. I mean, you can be in one state and it's a felony. You could be in another state and it's a slap on the wrist misdemeanor. And no matter what state, if somebody dies, that's a loss. And so when you see what looks like lack of accountability, that is also a loss. And so I think that a federal definition would help states be able to streamline definition and be able to come up with heftier sanctions, or to level out sanctioning to be somewhat consistent. Like, Florida is very tough. I mean, and rightfully so. Think about FAMU, what happened from the band death and Robert Champion to, being in some states, it's like that is one sentence, it is a misdemeanor, and there's not a lot around that. And so when you see, I think as a parent of either party, either the lack of accountability or the lack of the other pieces, I think it definitely leaves a dampening feeling of failure of the judicial system. But it's really, I think, from lack of guidance at the federal level.
Yeah, we need the judges to back us up and hold students accountable. I think that's another key piece to all of this. If they don't, and they're like, well, we can't ruin his life, he's a college kid. No, he killed somebody. Like, we need accountability to make sure that other people learn from that. And there's accountability, like that is the bedrock of who we are as a nation. So yes, we need accountability, please. So we need judges to back us up, but I'm telling you, that'll be one of the big recommendations, I think, of the dissertation is, hey, we need federal laws that are consistent. We have chapters in every state in the country, and they all have different barometers in terms of what hazing is and what the penalties are. This can't happen. This cannot happen. This is one of the main issues that we have right now. And I'm hoping that as a result of the dissertation, we make some changes. That would be a win for me, and then people can run with it from there. So really fascinating conversation. You and I could talk for hours about it. The other thing I want to talk about too is leadership. I think it's something that all fraternity and sorority members possess, but they don't necessarily look at themselves as leaders when they don't have a title that somehow proves that they're a leader. So how can students without a position in a fraternity or sorority also be great leaders?
I see this a lot in the employment context too, when you have individual contributors and they're like, I don't have a leader title. But what I know to be true is that even by joining your illustrious organization, you are a leader and your student body looks to you as leadership. Even when you have your letters on your chest, and even when your letters are off your chest, you are exhibiting values of an organization, something that's larger than yourself. And you never know who you're impacting through the way that you live your everyday ritual. I always say live your life through ritual, live your organizational values. You don't know who you're impacting by that. We have leaders by title, as in they are the designated president, they are the designated vice president, they're this designated person. And then you have leaders by action, and that just naturally derive because they are the people choice of leaders. You see this a lot in employment context too. You have a supervisor, and then you have a staff member that everyone goes to for everything because of their innate ability to lead. So what I would tell those students, similar to when I thought about my look back, I thought I became a leader when I became the president of NPHC. But there are so many people that I run into at homecoming, like, you were like one of our key student leaders. I'm like, man, I didn't become a student leader until I thought the year that I became NPHC president, but that wasn't true. I became a leader the moment I decided to pledge my life to live out an organization's values and my everyday rituals and my everyday life. And so we never know how that impacts other people. So you really have to take that in and believe that you're a leader, even without a title, because the best leaders oftentimes started off without title and they eventually get a title. So I would say just focus on being the best version of you that you can be, living your organizational values properly. And just remember, like, in some years after you graduate, you're just going to look back and be like, it was not so serious. I could have gave myself some grace to just grow. So start with the grace, focus on the development, live your organizational values, and the titles will come.
Beautifully said. I hope that there's a day when I can speak in front of an audience of 4,000 fraternity and sorority leaders. And when I ask at the front of the stage, who here is a leader, I want to see every hand go up. I mean, that would be a beautiful day, but I'm telling you right now, they don't look at it that way. And I'm trying to get there. But hopefully one day we will, especially if they listen to your words. I think they absolutely will. Now, we love great food here at the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. And so the next time that I get to Oklahoma City, I need to know where should I be going in order to get a great meal. Where's the spot?
I really like, and I know it's germane to Texas too, but I really like Brahms. They have some cherry limeade ice cream. They make all of their ice cream like in-house. When it's Christmas time, it's eggnog, and then during like what is it? It's like a form of pumpkin spice drinks that they create. I really think, even though it's in Texas too, my first run-in with it has been in Oklahoma, and I definitely think it's a spot to check out if you just want good burgers, custom milkshakes, and stuff like that.
I love that you have a sweet tooth like me and you went straight to ice cream. You're like, forget it. We're just going straight to dessert. I don't know what you're getting, but I'm getting dessert.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. All right. So if our listeners, if they want to bring you in for hazing prevention consulting, for leadership consulting, for DEI consulting, where can they go to connect with you?
C Eastlin at the C East. Oh, hold on one sec. C Eastlin at the cecollaborative.net.
Perfect.
I will get that to you in writing. So if someone
Get
they
that to
can,
me in writing. I'll put that in the show notes. All right.
okay, perfect.
You can also connect with Dr. Carolyn Eastlin on LinkedIn as well. So she's certainly available there. Feel free to connect with her. I think it's Dr. Carolyn E on LinkedIn. You'll be able to find her there. And what can I say? I'm super impressed with all the work that you're doing. I love all of your research interests because you and I could talk until the cows come home about it and figure out a path forward so that way we make all of our organizations better. So thank you for the work that you've done and keep doing it. Keep going. What can I say? Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Carolyn Eastlin, I want you to like it and I want you to share it with other college students that also need to hear her words. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks. Bye for now.